In today's episode, we will reveal some of the website we use as investors. And welcome back to Investing Mastermind podcast. I'm Signe Lundholt.
And I'm Michelle Markey.
Today, we're diving into some of the go-to websites that we use as investors. And we use these in order to actually make, I would say, more intelligent investment decisions. Before we go ahead and buy a stock, we would do some research. And these are some of the websites, some of the resources that we're using to get more educated on Warren Buffett's strategy, as well as looking into businesses. So these websites are in our toolbox, and we want to share them with you so that you can use them too. Michelle, do you want to start out with maybe the website or anything, a resource that you use a lot as an investor, or that you find incredibly helpful for you as an investor?
Well, one site that I check almost every day, just so I keep up on some of the news, is Wall Street Journal's website. So I check that, and from my local library, they give me the newspapers after a certain time. So I can see some of the headlines or things that are interesting about some of the companies I'm interested in or invested in, and then I can go to the newspaper and read about them. So Wall Street Journal is one of my go-tos just to keep up on some of the latest what's going on with business.
That's a great resource and definitely a news website. So for me, I'm not necessarily reading a whole lot of newspapers, and investors out there turn in their grave for me saying that. What I do is I follow Bloomberg Business, Yahoo Finance, something like Statistica on social media. But my favorite go-to website for news is actually something like AP or Reuters, because they're independent. But I'm actually not necessarily using that many news websites because it just honestly gives me anxiety. So, and I'm a journalist. I used to be a news when I was very young. I was a news reporter. So I tend to not look too much to that. Also, I have a lot of knowledge behind the scenes, but I do want to say that if something happens to the stock price in my wonderful business, I do go to, for example, Yahoo Finance to figure out what's going on. And the reason why I go there is because I actually think it's some decent reports on there. They do tend to talk to some analysts that, in my opinion, know what they're talking about. Like, for example, for Danish newspapers, what they talk about is they try to come up with what they believe the stock price is going to be, like that's not that interesting, right? We want to know what actually happened. What are some of the business fundamentals that they're talking about these days, or macroeconomic trends or something like that. So if it's news, it's something like that. But one of the websites I do use quite a lot is something like Guru Focus. Now I say it in Danish. Guru Focus is maybe what you say in English. It's just a great website for studying businesses. I really like how they visualize, and just they continue to be better and better. And also the reason why I like Guru Focus is because I believe that they're value investors or Buffett style investors, or something along the line of investing and not necessarily trading. They don't have a whole lot of trading resources on that website. So that's why I like that. Is that a website you use at all, Guru Focus?
Yes, and sometimes I like looking up metrics like long-term debt and the trailing 12 months earnings that some of the businesses have. And even though in the free version you're limited in how much history you can see, but it's a good starting point for just a quick hand if you don't want to do all the math by going to individual companies' investor relations websites and getting their 10K annual or 10Q quarterly reports. Then you can quickly find what's the long-term debt of a company so that you can quickly decide, I'm going to keep spending time on looking into this company, or like, it's too much debt, it's too scary. So I like that from Guru Focus, that we can quickly find those financial details. And also along the lines of what you mentioned of analyst reports, sometimes I've used Seeking Alpha and just use like free articles. Like, there's only a limit to how much you can see for free. But I've known some people who sign up to Seeking Alpha and then they use that as a good source to learn about companies as well.
Yeah, I used to actually use Seeking Alpha a lot over time, and maybe they changed back, but over time, I really thought there was a lot of, just noise on the website, and maybe they're better at filtering out all that noise, like people's opinions, rather than actually a good analysis. So I hope they kind of, got back into focusing on credible sources rather than just some person ranting. I used to use that one too. Another website which can be quite useful once a quarter is Dataroma. On Dataroma, you can keep track on what Buffett is buying, what he's selling, what he's hanging on to. There's a ton of websites out there. Even Guru Focus actually release this information. There's so many websites out there. I like Dataroma because, well, the usability is not necessarily that nice, but all the investors that I'm interested in are there and easy to find on their list. It's quick, it's easy. I don't have to search for them. There's a list of them there, and there's not all these random other hedge fund managers that I'm not interested in. They are not on these lists. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I like that one.
Yeah, and what you're describing is the 13F filing that investors that have at least $100 million of assets under management have to disclose. So whether you're a company or an individual investor who manages over $100 million, we would see what their equity holdings are. So like you said, Signe, Warren Buffett for Berkshire Hathaway, we could also see Monish Pabrai and Guy Spear or Greg Alexander. There are some of these big name investors, and also some other similar websites to Dataroma include also Whale Wisdom or sometimes Fintel. But I find that I like the interface the most from Dataroma compared to the other two. But if you maybe don't see something on Dataroma, you might be able to find it on the other site. So that's why it's good to know a few that you can see these 13F filings. Besides the source, which is, of course, the SEC's Edgar. You could go all the way there and find the real filing, but that takes a little bit more work. So these guys usually have it pretty quickly from when they get released.
And I really wish that now Guy Spear is on there, even though his fund is in Switzerland. I think it's also partly in New York, and then maybe that's why we actually can see what he's buying. But I wish that fund managers outside of US had the same requirements. But I also can see, like here in the EU, we're not one country, right? So that it's each country that decides, should we have investment managers actually be transparent about this information. But I think it's great that in the US you can see, okay, what is it that they're buying? What is it they're shorting right now? Recently we were able to see, are they shorting any businesses, which is also quite interesting, right? So it's nice with that kind of transparency, and actually also necessary, in my opinion. I think it's really great that they have that. So if I am to put a stock price on a certain business, like let's say I have something that I really like, a wonderful business that I want to own, I'll have to figure out, okay, what is the price that I should pay for it? And I could either look it up on Securities and Exchange Commission, like if it's a US company, and look up the annual report, the financial data in Section 8. I could do that, or I can use websites like Yahoo Finance. I used to actually use Yahoo Finance quite a lot. They get their data from Morningstar, so they subscribe to data from another business that's called Morningstar. They extract the data from the annual reports. The annual reports is the source, so that's where you will get the most valid data. However, sometimes over time, a business might actually recalibrate previous years and their numbers. And then if you use the annual report, you actually won't get the right numbers. So a source like Yahoo Finance is good for that. There's macro trends where you can get free data 10 years back. It's primarily US companies though on macro trends. And then there's also Market Watch where you can get that data, but it's a much more busy website. What's nice about Market Watch is one of the things that Phil Town, for example, says is that you just try to get an idea of what some of the bigger analysts predict what the growth of the business will be. And Yahoo Finance actually used to extract that information. They don't do it anymore, as far as I can see. So you have to go to MarketWatch. They do extract that information from the institutional broker estimate system, which is, where all these analysts input the data of what they predict. So highly educated analysts that are following these businesses actually record what they believe the future growth of the business will be. And it's also kind of nice to be able to say, what do some of the experts predict? It could be both an analysts, but also bigger merger acquisition companies like Bain and private equity companies and things like that. So I think that's also very nice to just check. It's called something different now, I believe. Maybe it's not called institutional broker estimate system anymore, but anyways.
Yeah, those are some great websites. And I think we covered a lot of them. I'm not sure if there's any more, Sina, you want to touch on in terms of websites, but I was going to switch gears a little bit to some newsletters that I like to keep tabs on. So I still get newsletters from Phil Town and the Rule One Investing. So sometimes we can see, oh, what's Phil's perspective on inflation and the stock market? So those I look at every now and then. Or also, I get this newsletter from someone who seems to have a little bit more of a bearish take on the stock market, someone named Jesse Felder. And sometimes I get the notion that the stock market could be in a bubble because of a lot of some of the recap from Jesse Felder of what he shares in his newsletters. But in contrast, actually, one website that I forgot to mention was of an investor I like named Matthew Peterson. And he's got a lot of interesting resources too. But in contrast to Jesse Felder, Matthew Peterson is way more bullish about the stock market. So it's good to equip yourself with opposing views. Like you don't want to just only buy into one view that, it's this or that. You want to have more of a well-rounded perspective. So it's good to kind of know about what people think and what their evidence is to suggest that the market could be this or that. But overall, that's not such a big deal because in spite of whatever anyone thinks on a macro level, we should still focus on an individual company level. So that's my takeaway with those. And Sina, what are some newsletters you'd like to look at?
Yeah, so I have a couple of newsletters too that I recommend that you subscribe to. So there's, of course, Guy Spear that we talked about many times. He doesn't come out with a newsletter very often, but when he does come out with a newsletter, it'll take you days to read it because there's so many, different avenues you want to visit. So it's just a really, really great newsletter. And I want to say that I really appreciate it. And I hope he's going to continue to write it because I don't get the newsletter that often anymore. So I hope he's going to continue to write it. It used to be more frequent. Adam Mead has a newsletter too where he will open up a little bit of some of his thoughts, some of his analysis. You can actually pay to be like a premium subscriber and actually get his in-depth analysis, which I really have huge respect for Adam. So he's I mean, right, Michelle, you know Adam too.
Yeah, he's great. And he's really great at teaching about investing. So he's got a lot of great resources online as well.
Yeah, 100%. So go ahead and subscribe. Just, his free newsletter is absolutely amazing. I actually thought about recently that I should subscribe to the paid version because it's so great. Then there's also there's Vitaly Katzenelson, who is also a hedge fund manager. He merges investing with art. So I really love to read his newsletter. And in his recent newsletter, there was also an invitation to his breakfast in Omaha. If anybody is going to Omaha, you can go and meet Vitaly, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. Started out small, now it's getting bigger and bigger. So that's wonderful. He does an amazing Q&A at this breakfast. So if you're in Omaha, you don't want to miss that.
And speaking of breakfast, I also got the Markel email saying, see you at the brunch of the Markel meeting as well. So if you're going to Vitali's breakfast, you go there and then also get your brunch from Markel after.
Yeah, good point. Another one I'm subscribing to, sort of same, as you say, Michelle, we also sometimes want to just subscribe to people that aren't necessarily following Warren Buffett's style investing. And this one is actually someone that Charlie Munger did criticize at some point. Aswath Damodaran, who is a professor of finance at NYU Stern University. I like his newsletters too. So he's doing valuations, and I know that Charlie Munger did not always agree with him, and they had kind of had a little bit of a beef, those two. But I think it's still interesting to read his thoughts around valuation and things like that. So I do subscribe to his newsletter as well. So there are a few out there. We also actually our guest Wes that we had on one of the very first episodes, investing with Wes. He has this Substack, and also go subscribe to his Substack. So yeah, definitely recommend that one too.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's some social media folks that you might want to check out, like Signe just mentioned. I haven't been watching many other people's YouTube channels, but you could check out ours. This podcast, Investing Mastermind Podcast, is also on YouTube, in addition to my YouTube channel called Michelle Markey Investing. So that's somewhere that if you want to get more of a video instead of reading, it's somewhat of another option you have.
Yeah, super good point. Go actually go and check out Michelle's channel, because Michelle interviews, some really amazing people within this space. She also share your own thoughts around what's going on. So I really do encourage people to go check out the channel, and even, go there's content years back that's amazing content. So make sure to go subscribe to Michelle's channel. But yeah, I think that's some of the resources, some of the websites and online resources that we go and actually use frequently, and that we also suggest that you go ahead and use. And in the previous episode, we talked about a stock screener, a stock search machine that we use. So if you want to know more about the stock screener, you should definitely go back and listen to that episode with some concrete information about how you should use it. But that was more in depth rather than this one. So I believe that's it. If you're using any websites out there that we didn't mention that we definitely should go check out, we would love to hear from you. Which websites are you using? Do make sure to share it in the comments, because then other people would be able to visit as well. So again, within the investment space, Buffett style investing, we would love to know which resources that you're using. So we're coming towards the end of today's episode. Michelle, do you have any final remarks, anything you want to say towards the end here?
While we talk about websites, which you can go happily surf, there's also the advent of AI and ChatGPT. If you're using services like that, you can compare some of the results you're getting from AI language learning models and compare that to traditional sources. So that's always another resource that will probably be growing in the future. And we have some people we know who are using language learning models to form some ways of studying companies. So I don't want to reveal too much, because I think that investor will come out with their AI based tools that people can potentially leverage online. But that might be something we bring up in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say right now that if you use ChatGPT, just make sure, because the data could be flawed, so it's not always correct. So make sure to ensure that it's actually correct what ChatGPT is providing to you. Sometimes it's not all correct, actually. Oftentimes it's not. But what you're talking about, Michelle, is other types of AI. So yeah, we're watching that very closely, and actually got to try it out ourselves, and hopefully we'll be able to share more about that in the future.
For sure.
But until then, we hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be back in 2 weeks from now.
Till next time.
If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you automatically get new episodes in your feed.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.